Lee, Bud, Kenny, and Lily stood outside Warner Robins. The place was completely overrun. Walkers gathered around the gate where the group was. "That's a lot of them," Lee said. "Yeah, either way you look at it, there ain't an easy way to get supplies," Kenny said. "We have to try. We can't go back with nothing," Lily said. "Yeah, but how about we actually come back? We go in there, we'll die," Bud said. "Bud's got a point. We don't have enough firepower, and forget killing those things these up close," Lee said. They tensed up when they heard a car approaching. They aimed their weapons at the approaching vehicle. The vehicle rolled to a stop when a man came out. He wore a pair of glasses, a black shirt, cargo pants, and boots. "Easy now. I don't want any trouble," the man said. "Who are you?" Kenny inquired. "Mark?" Lily asked as she lowered her rifle. "Lily, I thought that was you," Mark said. "A friend of yours?" Lee asked. "Yeah, kind of. Mark was a pilot here. In fact, he was probably the only pilot who didn't give me shit," Lily said. "You could trust him." The group relaxed, and they lowered their weapons. Mark turned around and he said, "We don't have a lot of time. I barely got out of there, and those things probably still are chasing me." "We need to get inside," Bud said. "There's commissary food and guns inside. We'll need those." "Already grabbed them," Mark said. "You're in a group, right?" They nodded in response. "Okay, good. Get me back to your group and let me join. Then it'll all be yours." "You got a deal. Thanks," Bud said. "Trust me, I have no intention of getting eaten," Mark said. "Okay, I know the way to get back to the motor inn from there," Lily said. "Right. You drive Mark there. We may get separated," Bud said. "So if we do, at least he'll be able to get the supplies there." Lily nodded and got into the driver's seat of the car. Mark got the passenger side while Lee, Kenny, and Bud got in the truck. "Oh shit," Kenny muttered as he looked through the rearview mirror. "I see why Mark fella was in a hurry." Lee and Bud turned around and saw several walkers limping towards them. Kenny tried to start the engine, but it stalled. "Son of a bitch," Kenny snapped as he kept turning the key in the ignition. Again, the engine didn't start. "What's going on?" Lily inquired. "The engine's still stalling. Just go. We'll get out of this," Kenny said. Lily nodded before she drove off. Kenny popped the hood and got out of the truck. When he opened the hood and said, "Lee, turn the key when I say so," Kenny said. Lee got out of the back seat and got into the driver's seat. Meanwhile, Kenny fiddled around with the engine as a herd of walkers limped closer. "Now," Kenny said. Lee turned the key, and it was close to starting up, but it didn't. Kenny went back to messing with the engine. A couple of minutes passed. Lee was wondering if they should make a run for it. "Now," Kenny said. Lee turned the key. This time the vehicle started. Kenny slammed the hood down and got into the passenger seat. "Go!" Kenny said. Lee stomped on the gas pedal and sped off from the approaching herd. "Damn, that was close," Bud said. "You might have to invest in a new vehicle, Ken. This one's just about had it," Lee joked. "I would, man, but those car salesmen are just corrupt sons of bitches," Kenny joked. "Damn, I thought I had a bad sense of humor. How can you guys joke about something like that?" Bud said. Lee and Kenny chuckled, and Lee said, "Just came at the moment." "Geez," Bud said. There was a chuckle in his voice, but he certainly was shaken up by the experience. The truck drove into the motor inn, and Lee placed the vehicle in the park. Mark, Lily, and Carly were busy getting the food and weapons from the car. Kenny and Bud got out to join them. But when Lee got out, he was immediately greeted by Clementine, who wrapped her arms around his leg. Lee chuckled as he bent down and picked her up. "Hey, baby girl, did you miss me?" Lee asked. Clementine nodded in response. "I not like it when you leave," Clementine said. "Sorry, baby, but I gotta help out." "Were you a good girl while I was gone?" Lee asked. Clementine nodded in response. "Duck not mean today," Clementine said before she yawned. "It's about time you have your afternoon nap," Lee said. Clementine nodded in response. Lee carried her over to the room they share. He went over and grabbed her pacifier just before he went over and grabbed a baby book. He didn't cradle her like he normally did. Instead, he let her look at the pictures from the book. "All right, let's read this one. Then you'll have to go to sleep," Lee said. Clementine nodded her head in response. Lee started to read from the baby book. Clementine was taking in everything as she was slowly beginning to fall asleep. After a while, Lee reached at the end of the book and closed it. He placed it on a nearby bed and carried the toddler over to the crib. She was still awake, but Lee knew that she would fall asleep in a matter of minutes. He put her in the crib and tucked her in, then walked outside the door and he left it a cracked open so the air could move in and out, so he could pick her up on calling for him when she woke up again. Lee walked over to see all the food and supplies were being accounted for. Bud and Lily and Carly were taking stock while Mark was walking over to Lee. "Hey, I wonder where you ran off to," Mark said. "Yeah, I had to put Clementine down for a nap," Lee said. "Clementine?" Mark asked. "Is she your daughter or something?" "Kind of. I'm looking after her until we could find her parents," Lee said. "Oh, do you know where they at?" Mark asked. "Savannah," Lee said. "Damn, that's a stretch from there," Mark said. "Yeah, and I don't think they made it. I went through her house and found an answering machine. She was set up at the treehouse, probably put there by her babysitter. Before she turned, it didn't sound good," Lee said. "I think her father got bit and turned and her mother was either shot or ripped apart." Mark's eyes became wide. "Son of a bitch. Well, at least you good thing you're looking after her." Lee nodded his head in agreement. He knew he could have asked his work cut for him, but he didn't care. He enjoyed looking after the baby. The weather had gotten colder 3 months later. It was mid-fall for the group of survivors. They stayed in the motor inn for 3 months. Lee approached the walker from behind and slammed the axe down its skull. It appeared that the walker was eating something. He pulled the axe out of its skull and looked down at what appeared to be a half-eaten rabbit. "Great. What did they get this time?" Mark asked. "It looks like a rabbit," Lee said. "Well, that's another meal loss," Mark muttered as he walked further into the forest while Lee joined alongside him. Both of them were in search of more food. There was hardly anything left at the motor inn. "I hardly called a rabbit a meal, Mark, but hell, I'd take it," Lee said. "I still can't believe we ate all that commissary food in 3 months. It seemed like so much at the time," Mark said. "Maybe you shouldn't have opened the door," Lee said. "Yeah, except I'd probably be food by now," Mark said. "Trust me, I have no regrets." They walked a little further in silence until Mark said, "I wonder how much food we got left." "You'll have to ask Bud," Lee said. "He's the one handling the rations. Or mishandling if you ask Kenny," Mark said. "It seems like he's getting more hostile with you and Bud each passing day." "Yeah," Lee muttered. "I know he's worried about his family, but fuck, we have to feed the baby." "I ain't arguing with that. How is she anyway?" Mark asked. "She's doing pretty good. She's happy. She keeps asking about her mom and dad. She misses them," Lee said. "I bet. She's still a baby, so it's normal for her to miss them," Mark said. "You've done a great job so far. She loves you, Lee. Don't forget that." "Trust me, I don't," Lee said. "She always puts a smile on my face." "Yeah, I think she puts a smile on everyone's face except Larry. I'm sick of him," Mark said. "I think we all are," Lee said. "Did he beat you up one time?" Mark asked. "Yeah, Bud had to lay some rules for him," Lee said. "He and Lily need to cool it. She's being snippy and claiming that her dad isn't getting enough food. Getting weaker, which is bullshit," Mark said. "The man's all muscle." "I know. He's just looking out for his daughter. But you're right. He needs to calm down," Lee said. "So, what do you think about that Wyatt guy and that guy that Vince and Justin a couple of weeks back?" Mark asked. "He seems all right, but I do think something happened, but he looks just really paranoid," Lee said. "Glad to hear it. I'm not the only one who thinks that dude's completely jumped the other day when I tapped his shoulder to get his attention," Mark said. Mark then looked around until he stopped and ran over to a nearby shrubbery. Lee then joined him as he aimed his gun at the bird. "Don't shoot. A gunshot will bring walkers. A bird ain't worth it," Lee said. Mark sighed and said, "I guess so. I'm just really hungry." Mark lowered the gun, but as soon as he did, a yell was heard. A bird flew from the yell, and both men looked towards each other. "Was that Vince or Kenny?" Mark asked. "I don't know," Lee said. He stood up along with Mark and ran towards the source of the screaming. They all passed through several trees as they ran for the source of the screaming. They finally reached the opening and saw a man stuck in a bear trap. There was a teenage boy trying to get him out, while another teenage boy held the hand of a frightened little girl. She was actually appeared to be Clementine's age. She seemed to be trembling. She was scared, and the man jumped down and yelled out in pain as a teenage boy tried to free him. "Holy shit," Mark muttered. As the two teenage boys looked around, they were surprised by two men. "Oh shit, no, we're just trying to help get our teacher out. After that, we'll leave, I swear," the teenage boy who was working on the trap said. "Mark, you guys okay?" Kenny asked as he ran into the clearing. Soon Vince and Justin ran into the clearing as well. "What's going on here?" Vince asked. "Travis, maybe they can help," Ben said. "These guys might be the same guys that raided our camp, and we barely got away from that," the boy Travis said. "What guys? Why is there a bear trap doing out here?" Kenny said. The toddler was just with the boys and started to cry in response. "Shit, calm her down. Those things could probably hear," Travis said. "I don't know how," the other boy exclaimed. "Calm down. We'll give her to me. I'll calm her down," Vince said. He went over to the toddler as she continued to wail. "Hey," Vince said as he picked her up and started to bob her in his arms. Her wails started to become whimpers as Vince held her close. "Please help me," the man was stuck at the bear trap said. Mark then walked over to the bear trap and started to examine it, and the man groaned in pain. "Lee, this trap's been altered. There's no release latch," Mark said. "Oh no," Travis muttered. The group looked over at him and followed the line of his vision. He was staring at the other end of the clearing. There were several walkers limping towards the group. "Shit, walkers, it's now or never, Lee," Kenny exclaimed. "Please, get me out of this thing," the man pleaded. "Mark, keep the boys back. Vince, you got the baby. Kenny, keep those walkers off of me," Lee said. He looked at the trap and placed the axe between the jaws of the trap. He tried to pry it open, but it didn't work. Instead, it made the man howl in pain. Lee huffed as he tried to look at the chain necks. "Mark, can we cut through that?" Lee asked as he stood upright and gestured to the chain. "No way. We use chains like that to lift heavy machinery. You're not cutting through that," Mark said. Justin sighed in before he walked up. "I might have an idea. His leg." The two men looked him in horror in the eyes. "It's either that or he dies. Those walkers are getting close," Justin said. Lee sighed and said, "You're right." "No, wait! Try the trap again! Anything, please!" the man exclaimed. However, Lee didn't listen. He brought the axe up and brought it down on the man's leg. He screamed out in pain as Lee's axe made contact. The toddler in Vince's arms started to cry again as Vince did his best to comfort her. Lee brought his axe down again and again on the man's leg. The man yelled out in pain every swing until Lee finally cut his leg off. The man looked down at his recent stump and gasped in horror. He had then lost consciousness. The gunfire seized the group and looked over him. The boy Travis gagged at the sight and he staggered. "Is he?" Mark asked with horror in his eyes. "He passed out," Lee said. "Well, if he's alive, grab him and let's go," Kenny said. Mark squatted down and hoisted the man. The rest of the group followed, but Lee noticed the boy Travis was in danger. "Behind you!" Lee exclaimed. The other boy looked back and he exclaimed, "Travis! Come on, we gotta go," Lee said. He tried to drag the other boy away when he heard Travis panicking and screaming. "No!" the teenage boy exclaimed. Lee dragged the teenager away as his friend was mauled by walkers. There wasn't anything they could do for the boy at this point. They just had to get back to the motor inn. Part of Lee wondered if Bud would be angry over what he did, even though he did what he had to do.